Well, I have a twin sister. Her name is Heidi. And we grew up in a very kind of basic, general middle-class family. Not a lot of turmoil. No cussing and yelling. My grandfather was a minister. My grandmother raised us because my mom was so young when she had us that she was too young to take care of us. So my grandmother stepped in and took care of us. And so we were raised in this very normal, atmosphere. And then my mom got us back at some point as we were a little bit older. And she remarried my dad. And then we moved in with him. And then that's kind of where some turmoil did start. My dad could be very physically overbearing at times and abusive. And so they ended up separating when that was going on. And then it was just me and my sister and my mom, like through my whole teenage years. So it was like 3 sisters in a way, because my mom's only 15 years older than me. So it was like we were raising each other. So we had a lot of fun then too. We weren't bad, because when my mom said something, we respected it and that was it. But we did have a lot of freedom, and we matured very fast. And we were latchkey kids too, where you kind of let yourself in, take care of yourself, you feed yourself and all that. And then she'd come home and make dinner, and then there you go. And she was in school. My mom went into college, so she was not there a lot. She worked a lot and was in school, so it was just me and my sister. And every friend in the neighborhood. We had kids constantly there. So it was always packed. And we were wild. I'm glad that my daughter does not do half of the stuff that we did. Because, oh, no, I know. I know. Her maturity level isn't the same as we were. We were pretty grown at 15, really. But then we ended up bouncing back and forth between Jacksonville and here, because I'd be with my mom for a while, and then I would get burnt out, and I'd come back here and be with my grandmother. And then I would be with her, get burnt out in Pensacola, go back to Jacksonville. So we kind of bounced a lot back and forth. And during my period in Jacksonville, I ended up dating a man named Russell and getting pregnant with my son, Matthew. And during that time, my mom and dad decided to get remarried after all these years. Yeah. Which I was, at the time, was not happy about, because I was used to being able to see my dad when I wanted, see my mom, when I wanted, and not have to see him to see her. So I wasn't happy about that. And but they did. They've been married now for 26 years. So I guess it worked better with us out of the house. So they didn't have us to argue over anymore. They were married 3 times to each other. They tried. Third time was the charm for them, I guess, because the first 2 didn't go so well. And that was because of my dad and the way he's not, the way he was back then. He could be very physically abusive, which we weren't used to. We didn't get whippings, and then all of a sudden we're living with my dad and we're getting, it wasn't good, and my appendix ended up rupturing once, and I had to have my appendix removed. And he says that wasn't, he didn't do that, but he did. You know, I had bruises, and I think I remember the police coming into the hospital, you know, looking at me and stuff. So, but that was a long time ago, you know, and I held on to it for a long time. I held on to that for a very long time. And then I finally, you know, had to let it go, and I had to forgive him and move on, because if I didn't, then it would just mess me up. So I was like, you know what? I let it go. And he's not like that anymore. You know, he's a better grandfather than he was a dad. So that's good, at least. I ended up moving back to Pensacola, and of course, I had my son with me, and we were living at my grandmother's, and then I got a job at a club here in Pensacola and got an apartment, and it was me and him, you know, and my grandmother kept him while I worked, because I worked at night. So, you know, she'd take him to school in the mornings, and I'd get him from school, bring him home. And during the time that I was working at the club, I ended up dating my daughter's dad. And we were together for probably like 3 years, and it was very up and down, like constant pretty much from the beginning. And for some reason, I would break it off, but he'd always come back, pull me right back in. And we ended up moving back to Jacksonville, and he got a job. So he went with me, and it just got even worse once we got over there. And we ended up splitting up, and he came back. But when he came back, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. So I called and told him, and he came back, and I shouldn't have let him come back, honestly. But I was like, you know what? I'm not with my son's dad. So I wanted to be with at least one of the fathers of my children. I didn't want to be that, you know, have another child, not even have him in the home. I wanted that 2-parent family for her. And it was horrible. It was not good. The whole pregnancy, it was just constant. And I had my daughter, and he got a job back over here. So then we came back over here. Yeah. And then we're here, and we get a home, and everything is kind of working itself out. So I'm at a point where I'm thinking, okay, the relationship took this long to get kind of stable. Like 6 years it took to finally get to this place. But I saw how he was with her as a baby, and it just made me see him in a different light finally. And I thought it was going to just start progressively getting better, but it didn't. It just went right back, especially once he got over here. And he was, what is the word? He didn't know how to be monogamous. But I could never prove anything, so I was always to be made to feel like I was crazy, that he wasn't doing this, he wasn't doing that. And I was like, one day I will catch you. One day I'll be able to prove it, you know. And so we argued a lot, and we drank a lot too. I drank a lot. When I saw him pull up, I'd make a drink, but I had to, because I couldn't deal with him in a normal mind. You know, and at one point I was so depressed and so down because of our relationship and how much we fought that I got down to like 98 pounds. I was anorexic. I was suicidal. I was on a lot of medication, like way overly medicated. I was on pain medication because of some medical issues that I had. I was on psychotics, anxiety meds, like everything you can think of. And it just was not good. And then I found I was pregnant again. And I was like, oh my God, Jesus, this is not happening. But I was like, okay, maybe this is good. And I weaned myself off of a lot of the medication because I won't take stuff like that pregnant. I didn't do it with my son. I didn't do it with my daughter. I wasn't going to do it with this one. And like in my second trimester, I had a miscarriage, a bad one. And ended up hemorrhaging and like was in the hospital for 3 days. And while I'm in the hospital, he goes to the strip club with his friend. You know, I mean, this is the mind frame that this man had. He didn't care about anybody other than himself or what he could get away with. And I got out of the hospital and I came home, and then it just got worse because at this point, he had made it to where he was just very mental. We could be very physical, because we'd both be drunk, and then he would be in my face. You know, he'd like push your buttons, you know, the ones that knows your buttons. And then I'd end up hauling off and hitting him, you know, and I think I blacked his eye twice because he would be right here yelling at me. And then, but a lot of his abuse was mental. He'd say stuff. And after I had the miscarriage, then he tried to make me feel like it was my fault. I did it, you know, because the stuff I take or what I took before, and it was because I wasn't healthy, you know, whatever. I wasn't healthy, and I wasn't healthy physically to carry the baby. That's why. I'm sure I miscarried. When I got pregnant, like I said, I was 98 pounds, so I couldn't be healthy. And, but God knew what he was doing when that happened, because he knew I did not need to have another baby with this man. It just was not going to be good. But it was still, like I had a, what do you call it, postpartum? After I had the miscarriage. And it was bad, and it lasted a long time. And the only thing that kept me from doing it was my daughter. If it hadn't been for her, I would have did it. For sure I would have did it, because I couldn't escape him, because when I would leave, he would come back and get me, you know, and talk me back in. And it's funny when people say, why did you leave? You know, you left, why'd you come back? Why did you stay? Because of that mental, you know, game that he played. So I would come back. I was very anti-drug. Like my older sister, she had an issue with cocaine, and she'd come over and like leave it in my bathroom. I'd throw it away. I'd call her, you left your 8-ball on my sink. Oh, I'm coming to get it. Don't worry about it. I done flushed it. You better go buy you some more. You know, I had tried them all, but I didn't like it. This wasn't for me. It was a waste of money. I thought it was stupid. But at this point, when you get to such a mental low, you know, a friend of mine had some meth, and I was like, I am not doing that. You look crazy over there at that bowl, whatever you're doing. I'm not doing that. I'm like, I don't even know how to do it. And she was like, just shut up and here, I'll do it for you. I was like, but it was just me and her. So I was like, well, if I look crazy, nobody sees me but her. And it was something that just went. And instantly I was like, okay. Like all the pain that I would feel, all the things he would say, whatever it was like all of a sudden I didn't hear it. It was like, wah, 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 wah. I didn't, you know? I went home and he was running his mouth where I'd been, what was I doing, all this. And I just didn't hear it. And I looked at him and started laughing. I was like, shut up. Like, no, he couldn't make me cry anymore. And he didn't like that because instead of crying, I would laugh at him. So I would, I would get a little bit from her here and there, but it wasn't an issue. And that went on for almost a year, just here and there. And then it went from here and there to once a week, from once a week to every day, probably in a matter of about 4 months. And then I went from smoking it to shooting it. And as soon as that happened, in a 6-month time period, everything just went boom. Because once you inject something, it's completely different. You're no longer going to do something halfway. You're gonna do it up here. You're not going to settle for just a little bit of a high. You're going to go all in once you've done it. There's no going back to smoking it or snorting it or anything. There's no way. You can't. And then he found out about it or something, and it was my way out. And I ended up seeing somebody else. And during that time, my addiction got even worse because he was doing it just like I was, so it just, everything slowly progressed. And then I left him, and her dad, he came in and just shoo me right back into the house. It was the craziest thing, the way it happened. He just somehow, he brought me there, and he wouldn't let me leave, actually, really. He wouldn't let me leave. So then I was kind of like captive. He had me in the bedroom for like a month. And, but I was there again. And once my daughter saw me, I couldn't leave her. I was like, okay, I'm here. So that went on for like 6 months. And then I caught him finally with his boss. And I was like, okay, gotcha. I knew it. I told you when I caught you, then that would be it. And he was not having it. And at the time, I was actually on house arrest because in 2012, when I had the miscarriage, it was New Year's Eve, and we went out, and I wanted to go out to another bar, and he didn't want to because he'd been out a couple nights before and spent a bunch of money, so he was ready to go home. And I don't know what happened because I only had like 2 drinks at the bar, but I woke up in jail. And it was because he called the police. I had some kind of, I don't know, I think I had a mental break because I was on all that medication and maybe just the alcohol, I don't know, but I completely lost it and woke up in jail and ended up on 5 years probation because I ended up assaulting 2 police officers and all kinds of stuff. It was not good. But I was on house arrest at this point from violating, and, there's processes. Every time I violate, they do something else. So they put me on house arrest, and I was in the process of trying to leave, and he told my probation officer that he didn't know where I was, so they violated me. And when they violated me, I went on like a 9-day binge. I looked horrible. Oh my God, I looked like, my mugshot looked like I looked like the crypt keeper. It was horrible. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I look like? But it was amazing because I was happy to be in jail because I knew being in jail that I was finally free of him. You know what I mean? Like my family went in and got all my stuff out of the house and everything, and I didn't have to go back there. So it was done. That was it. And I was like, yes, good. I'm glad. And I violated again. And so when I went before the judge, he ordered me to rehab. And I was like, okay, I need that. Because at that point, I had been doing a lot of stuff. I was shooting up meth and bath salts. Like, a lot. And at that point, I mean, I was probably injecting 0.5 gram at least at a time, that's quite a bit, almost a whole. I've done a lot. And I was like, okay, I need to go. Let's do this. So I went to rehab, and I was there for 3 months. And I got out, and everything was great until it wasn't great anymore. You go run into people that you shouldn't be around, and then it starts all over again. And I avoided them for a while, but I had it in my head that, those are my friends. I care about these people, I can be around them. I'm not going to not be around them. I'm not doing it. But eventually you're going to do it. So, that was a mistake. 2017, I was sick, bad sick, and I didn't know what was going on or why. And at this point, I had introduced heroin into the game. Yeah. And I'd kind of started to back off of the meth once I started doing heroin, because then it's like, oh, this is even better. It was like unicorn tears and fairy dust. I was like, this is amazing. Nobody should feel this good. Nobody is. That's why people shouldn't do these things, because it's not normal to feel that good. And I didn't know what was going on, but I was sick. And finally, I just was like, I'm dying. I knew that if I didn't go to the hospital, like, immediately, that I was going to be dead the next morning. So I went to the hospital, and I woke up in the ambulance. They were transferring me from one to the other. And when I get to the next one, I mean, it's like madness is going on, and I'm just trying to get what is going on? What's wrong with me? And they finally, when they moved me to the CTU, I think, the cardiac critical care unit, they called all my family in, and they told me that I had endocarditis, which is a blood infection you get around your heart from shooting up drugs. I was septic. And the sepsis had gotten so bad that my organs were shutting down, and it was like actually made it to my brain. I'd had some mini strokes. I had hepatitis C, and something else. There was like 5 of them. And I was like, okay. And they're like, you need an open heart surgery. You need to have your aortic valve replaced. That's what it is. They said it's not working anymore. And they couldn't wait for the infection to die down because I would be dead. So they had to do the surgery while I had the infection still in my heart. So I was signing wills and things with my children because they didn't think I was going to make it out of surgery. I had like a 80-20 chance of living. And I made it through the surgery. I woke up and I was like, okay, I'm alive. And I was in the hospital for 8 weeks because I had to be on IV antibiotics. And I was on like 5 different antibiotics. I looked like a cyborg. I had so many IVs coming out of me. It was crazy. But I lived through that, and I have a mechanical heart valve now. Kind of sounds like a clock ticking. My husband can hear it, and he's like, tick. It's like, tick, tick, tick. Sounds like a clock. But I got out of that, and I was sober. I was sober that time for like 3 months. Yeah, the hospital, went to the methadone clinic. I was taking methadone. I was on such high painkillers, though, in the hospital from the surgery and everything that they didn't have time to wing me off of it when I left the hospital, so I had to go to the methadone clinic. And then I went around the wrong people and ended up going to the methadone clinic for 3 days. And by then I was starting to get, I was sick. As soon as I started getting sick from not having the methadone, then I went right back to heroin. I didn't really do meth anymore. Every once in a while, but it wasn't something that I pretty much blew my heart out within a year. There's people that do these drugs for years and years and years. And it takes that long sometimes for that to, have all that happen. But not me. I did it in a year. So I was like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And I was lucky, I know that. I never had any abscess or anything like that people get, from shooting up drugs, especially heroin. But it just takes over everything again. And so I just was out there doing my thing. I got my drugs, I got high. I would do it at the house a lot because I was home in my environment. I would go get it, but then I would come home. And then I would hang out with people. And I was really lucky because, I don't know, I was pretty good at keeping the wolves away. The men that like to prey on girls that are addicts and stuff like that. And I've seen a lot. There's a lot of bad stuff that happens, but they didn't try me too much. I was like, no, not happening. But then again, I think they do it to the ones they know they can, the ones that don't have families that really give a shit. And I am surrounded by nothing but people that care about me. That would come looking for me. I wouldn't disappear easy, so they didn't really mess with me too much. And I was over at this old man's house that we knew, me and my husband knew, and my husband was there. We weren't married at the time, obviously, but I had already met him a couple of times. He didn't remember meeting me because he was always really high. But I didn't really care for him at first because I thought he was an asshole, actually. He had this kind of attitude about him, and I was just like, whatever. But I did always notice that he was very respectful of any girl that he was with, and I always thought, that's cool. Like, I want that one day. You know what I mean? Like, because especially in that environment. Because you see men with women and they'll be all over them. They don't care who's around. They don't, very disrespectful. They didn't give two shits about that woman. That he was different, with them. So I was like, I'm going to find that one day. And so I'm over at my friend's house, who was this old cross-dresser. And he just loved me to death. And we were cool because I knew that I only hung out with people that I knew I felt comfortable with, you know what I mean? And not to say he hasn't ever done anything slimy, because I'm sure he has, and I know he has, but he never did with me. So I was like, okay. But him and his brother were there, and I was like, okay. But I was like, no, because he's an asshole. But his brother was so sweet. Oh, he was so sweet. Even though he could be a shit. He could be a shit too. But he was so sweet. So I would go to him, and I'd be like, hey, when I needed something, I'd be like, I need to get some out. And he'd be like, all right. And I'll be like, don't ask your brother, because he's like, oh, I got you. I'm like, okay. And he was dating this one girl at the time, and her name was Amanda, and she was cool. I liked her. And I went to go get some drugs from his brother at this house that they were staying at, and I actually did get some from him. And he shorted me, and I told his brother about it, and so he was like, I got you. I was like, see, he's such an ass. And he came into the dude's house that I was at, and him and her had broke up. I mean, he was just a sad mess. He was not happy about it. And I was just like, whatever, because how I have that disdain for him, you know? And so he was so sad, and I was in Luke's room, and I looked down the hallway, and he's down there, and I'm like, poor guy. I couldn't feel bad for him. I was just like, you know. And then I noticed him smiling at me down the hall, and I was like, oh, I know he's not flirting with me. I know he's not doing that, because he was always so pissy with me, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, mm-mm. And he's wandering around the house, and he comes back in the bedroom while I'm back there doing my makeup, you know, because people would get high. All they want to do is their makeup. Girls, constantly in the mirror. It's crazy. It's all they want to do is do makeup. And he comes in there, he starts talking to me. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, I'm talking to him. And you know, I saw a different side of him at this point. You know what I mean? He kind of had dropped the whole macho, whatever, attitude that he had. So I got to see a different side of him. And so we started talking and kind of hanging out. He would be over there at Luke's house. And I would say in a matter of within a week, we were like, that was it. We were right beside each other, like nonstop, 24 hours a day, hooked at the hip. And I went from not really caring for him all that much to knowing that that's who I was probably going to spend the rest of my life with, like that quick. And then probably by the end of the second week, he had proposed. And I was like, okay, like, easy, you know? And then, of course, we were very codependent, you know, on each other. We were very, like, at this point, our addictions are running side by side. They're together. If I had it, he had it. If he had it, I had it. We were working together to make sure that we stayed well and, you know, didn't get sick and all that. We went to Virginia on the drug run. And while we were there, on the way out of town to come back, we stopped and got married. So that happened all within a month of us being together, and we were married. By the time we came back here, we told people, nobody believed us, but I was like, we're married. I got clean a couple times. I went to rehab 1, 2, 3 times. And they didn't keep me clean. I went to jail. So me and him had, you know, we were doing things to support our addiction. You know, we would steal from stores, things like that at this point. When it was just me, I could afford my habit on my own. But when there's 2 people doing it, you know, you start running out of money pretty quick. And we had been arrested, and so I went to jail, and I was in jail for like 7 months. And while I was in jail, he went back to jail. And when I got out, you know, the addict brain, I was like, okay, I knew I was fixing to get my daughter back into the house. Not constantly, but I was going to be seeing her a lot more because I didn't see her very much for a couple of years because I was out there doing all that. And I was like, okay, so I got like 3 or 4 days to do what I want to do, and then I've got to get back to being sober. So I think was hanging out with this girl, and I think I had smoked a little bit, and that was by choice, because at that point I was like, I'm not going to inject anything into my body ever again. That's not going to happen. And I went to another friend's house, and my head started hurting really bad, like a bad migraine, and I didn't understand. I was like, God, this is like, I've never had a headache that bad. And I've had migraines before, but nothing like this. And I had gotten like a point of heroin from somebody. And I just like snorted a little bit. For like 2 days, I made a point. It was crazy. I never had a point lasting that long, but I was not wanting to do much. I just wanted to get rid of the headache. And then it got so bad that I was like, I got to go home. You got to take me home. So he took me home, and it just kept, like, my brain felt like it was fixing to pop out of my head. And it was during COVID. So I didn't want to go to the hospital, because I was like, they don't treat migraines anymore, really. And all these people are sick up there. And I was like, I'm not going up there. I just want to get rid of my headache. So I called a friend of mine, and I actually asked him, I said, do they have any pain pills? Because I just did not want to really, I didn't want to do heroin, because that was the one drug that really had me. And he's like, he doesn't have any pain pills, he only has heroin. And I was like, okay. Well, he comes, he brings me the drugs, and he had given me some he already had in a syringe, plus what I purchased. And I went in the house, and I'd never done an injection where I didn't know how much was in there. I've never done that, because I was really safe about doing it. Even though it's what I was doing, I tried to be very careful, because I didn't want to die. I just wanted to be well. And so I'd been sober for 7 months. So my system was back to a normal person's tolerance. And there was probably, I would say, probably at least a quarter of a gram of heroin in there. And I just couldn't think. My head hurt so bad. And so I just did it. And when I did it, it's funny, because people say, oh, they didn't know they were overdosing. And that, I feel like that's such bullshit, because I knew immediately it wasn't good. And I tried to open the door before I went down, and I didn't make it because my door was locked. And I woke up in the hospital the next day, and apparently, like 6 hours later, when my grandma got up, she tried to open the door, and it was locked, and she knocked, and I wouldn't answer. So she called 911, and they had to take the air conditioner out of the window for the paramedic to come in. And then, for whatever reason, the cop kicked the door down. I don't know why. She just didn't unlock the door for him. But my grandma said she had heard them say that I was non-responsive, and they took me to the hospital. Well, when I woke up in the hospital, I was violent, but I think they thought, obviously, that it was because they gave me Narcan, and I was coming out of them. But the Narcan didn't do that to me, because I wasn't physically dependent on it yet. I did it, but I wasn't, so it didn't make me all mad and crazy. But my head was hurting so bad still. So I'm telling them, look, I know I overdosed. Please, I don't want to hear your lectures right now. I get it. Bad me. I did something that you wouldn't do. But you don't understand how bad my head hurts. Well, some of my doctors came in from before. And, because I'd been in the hospital a few times, because I kept sepsis from doing drugs like that. I would get septic, go to the hospital. So my infectious disease doctor came in, and I looked at him, and I was like, look, something's wrong. something's wrong. My head is hurting so bad. And he said, okay, we'll order you a scan. And I'm like, okay, I just want to know what's going on. And they did the scan, and then they came back, and it was like, you had a stroke. And I was like, okay. Now I know when my head was hurting so bad. Thank you. Now what do we do? So he was like, it was a pretty bad one. And I was like, okay. So I had to stay in the hospital. And I was on I take blood thinners because of my heart. And they put the blood thinners, they took them from me because I had the stroke. If I blew a clot. And then they gave me back the blood thinners a couple of days later, but it hadn't healed right yet. So I had a brain bleed and a hemorrhagic stroke. And so my nose was bleeding really bad at the hospital. And once again, I'm telling them my head is hurting, something's wrong. And they got another scan, and then that's what it was. He came in, the doctor was like, oh, I got bad news. I'm like, what's that? He said, you had a brain bleed, you had a hemorrhagic stroke. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do about that? So they took me off the warfarin for a few days. And then I was in the hospital that time for 9 weeks from the 2 strokes. So when I got out of the hospital, I stayed sober because it scared the shit out of me. Honestly. The heroin didn't give me the stroke. The meth didn't give me the stroke. My INR was off, which is what tells you how thin my blood is. And from being in jail, they didn't give me the proper dosage of my warfarin. So when I got out, my INR dropped so low, that's what made me throw the clot. But it didn't matter that it didn't have anything to do with the drugs. It had to do with the fact that at that point I felt too scared to do anything. Like, I'm not going to have another chance. I've lived through open heart surgery. Now I've had 2 major strokes. I've had some mini strokes. Like, the next time, you know what I mean? I don't want to I'm not going to test fate or test the waters and go back in and go, oh, you know what I'm saying? So, and it's funny because people look at me when I say, like, I feel like the overdose saved my life, though, because I wouldn't have gone to the hospital. I would have sat at home and tried to self-medicate a stroke, not knowing it was a stroke. But because of that, I had to go to the hospital. I'm not saying that's a good thing, it's not, but it did force me to go, and I just couldn't go back to it. I just wasn't going to do it again. And especially when I started, my daughter was there all the time, so I had her back, and then she moved back in with me, and I had earned everybody's trust again in my family, and I was like, I'm not going to do this again. And I had promised my kids that I was done, and that was it. And I'm in it. And I told Rudy when he was in prison, that I wasn't going back this time. So if he got out again and went back to it, I wasn't going to follow him this time, because I followed him the last time when he got out. I had been sober 6 months. And that 6 months, I had his brother sober. I took him with me. We went to St. Augustine, to my parents' house. I'd show up on my door when my dad's standing there with this 6'5", Russian looking. His brother looked like he did look like this tall Russian guy. And my dad was like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "It's Rudy's brother, and we're here to get sober." He got sober. He got a job. We did all of it. When Rudy got out of prison, I went back to be my husband, and he went right back to it. So I went right back to it. But this time I was like, I'm not going back. you'll be alone. And I told him I wasn't playing. And he got out and went right back. And he tried to convince me for about a month that he wasn't doing it. But I know my husband. I've been around him high a million times. I know when he's high. I know when he's done something. I'm not, I know. And he tried to convince me that I was crazy. I was like, I'm not crazy. But I couldn't find it. He hid it really well until he overdosed on my toilet. And then I had all the proof I needed. And I called the ambulance, and they came, and they had to get him out of the bathroom because I couldn't pull him out of the bathroom. Which upset me because I have given CPR to so many people, but I couldn't give it to him. The one person that I would really want to give it to, not saying I didn't care about other people, but the one person I would want to save would be him. And I couldn't. So I had to call the ambulance, and they came in and they Narcaned him, and he sat up and was like, what's going on? I'm okay. Wait, I'm good. And I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You feel good right now. But you wasn't a minute ago when your head was purple. But it broke my heart because I had to make him leave at that point. Because if I didn't, her dad would take her away from me. And if I didn't, I would have to leave with him. Because it was my grandmother's house. You know what I'm saying? If it was my house, I could have probably played it differently. But I had no choice. So I had to make him leave. So he went to the hospital on a gurney. And when he got out of the hospital, all his stuff was packed on the front porch. And he left. And then I had to watch from a distance him spiral down, being homeless, and with his legs, when that happened with his legs, and he got the ulcers, and I didn't realize how bad it was because I didn't see him very often. Because I didn't want to see him like that. I didn't want to see him, like I see pictures every once in a while or something, and I would just be like, I didn't recognize him. And it hurt me too bad to see him like that. But I stayed sober. I was like, I'm not going back. No matter how hard it was. It was really hard for me not to follow him. It was really hard. I would see him on occasion, and I wouldn't want to leave him. I'd want to be there with him, but I couldn't. I had to leave. So it was really difficult. But the day he called me, when he was laying in the ditch, and he asked me what he should do, and I was like, go to the hospital again. Call an ambulance, go to the hospital. And he actually went, because I've been trying to get him to go to the hospital for months. But he went, and then he called me when they were releasing him. And he said, they're releasing me. I don't know. What do I do? Where do I go? He asked, should I go back to Luke's house? And I was like, absolutely not. Because if you go there, then you're going to go right back to it. Because the doctor at the hospital had put him on Suboxone. And I was like, that's amazing. First time a doctor tried to help him get off of something. And he said they said they'd take him to the shelter. And I said, go to the shelter. And he went to the shelter. So I was like, at this point, I was like, as long as you're there, and as long as you're sober, then I will be right there with you. You're my husband, and I love you. But as long as you're out there doing that, I can't be with you. But he continued to stay sober, even through everything, even after his brother died, which I thought was absolutely amazing, because I don't know if I could say I would do it. I don't know if I could do it. But he did it, and I was so proud of him. I have been sober since, I say, September 18th of 2019. The day I went into jail is the day that I put my heart into being sober and stay in it. But some people say, oh, well, because of what I did when I had the stroke, then that erases the 8 months of my sobriety. And, it's like, oh, well, you were in jail, so you had to be sober. No, I didn't. You know how much drugs come into jail? Sometimes you can get drugs easier in jail than you can on the street. So for the people that want to be politically correct, I guess March 28th of 2020. So it worked for me. I know that everybody's sobriety is different. Everybody's recovery is different. What works for some don't work for others. Some people say you have to go to meetings all the time, and be a part of, have a sponsor and all that. And that's wonderful. And I know that if that's what you need, then absolutely do that. My husband is my sponsor. He, when I need to talk to somebody, I can talk to him because he gets it. He's been right there with me through at least 70% of my addiction. So, and then I don't know, I wish there was like a little wand you could wave to make things, just be packaged great. But I don't know. Just, things work different for everybody. Mine is being around my family and being around my kids because my son lives with me now too. He moved over here from Jacksonville. So, and then now my husband's back in the house. So I have my entire family around me, and it keeps me grounded. Without them, I definitely would probably be right back in the same spot.